There is no way the president can be questioned when he decides to constitute his executive.
Sure.
It's as simple as that.
Sure.
And we trust the wisdom of the president. I think South Africans would know that we have a very thoughtful individual in the role of the president of the Republic of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. So there is no need to consult anyone, because ultimately he is the chief executive officer. South Africans must trust his decision making, because ultimately that is how we are going to measure his performance.
There is really no obligation on the president to give the reasons. The reasons are well known between the president and the deputy minister.
A few moments later.
Statement by President Cyril Ramaphosa on the removal of Deputy Minister Whitfield. Friday, 27 June 2025 at 1 p.m. South African time. On the 25th of June 2025, I removed Mr. Andrew Whitfield from the position of Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition in terms of Section 93(1) of the Constitution. It is not common practice for the President of the Republic of South Africa to provide reasons either for the appointment or dismissal of members of the executive. However, due to several unfortunate statements and outright distortions by a number of people, especially Mr. John Steenhuisen and Mr. Whitfield himself, it is necessary for me to make a public statement on the circumstances surrounding Mr. Whitfield's removal. Mr. Whitfield was removed as a deputy minister because he undertook an international visit without the permission of the President. I repeat, Mr. Whitfield was removed as a deputy minister because he undertook an international visit without the permission of the President. His travel to the United States was a clear violation of the rules and established practices governing the conduct of members of the executive. This requirement is known to all ministers and deputy ministers. These rules and established practices were expressly communicated to all members of the executive during the induction sessions at the commencement of the 7th administration. These rules and practices were repeated in Cabinet in March this year by me as President. All international travel by members of the executive must always be undertaken with the express permission of the President. This practice is rigorously observed and adhered to by all members of the executive. However, Mr. Whitfield deliberately chose to violate this rule and practice. Prior to the removal of Mr. Whitfield, I informed Minister John Steenhuisen, as the leader of the Democratic Alliance, that I had decided to remove Mr. Whitfield from his position as Deputy Minister, and that I expect him to present to me for approval a replacement for Mr. Whitfield from his party, as the day is entitled to a Deputy Minister as agreed. In that discussion, Mr. Steenhuisen informed me that Mr. Whitfield had been expecting that he may be dismissed on the grounds that he had undertaken an international trip without the President's permission. This expectation, along with a perfunctory letter of apology that Mr. Whitfield wrote to me following his travel to the USA without the required permission, indicated that he was aware that his actions had violated the rules and established practices governing the conduct of members of the executive. During my discussion with Mr. Steenhuisen, he asked me if there was precedent for the action that I intended to take in relation to Mr. Whitfield. I informed him that there was indeed prior precedent. I told him that in 1995, President Nelson Mandela dismissed the late Deputy Minister Madikizela Mandela, and that in 2007, President Thabo Mbeki dismissed Deputy Minister Nasiso Routledge on the grounds of undertaking international travel without permission. Given all these circumstances, there is consequently no reasonable grounds for Mr. Steenhuisen and the Democratic Alliance to issue ultimatums and threats when the President exercises his constitutional prerogative and responsibility. Nor are there any grounds to try link this with matters that have no bearing on the conduct of the former Deputy Minister. There is really no basis for suggestions that the dismissal of the former Deputy Minister is related to any other reason than his failure to receive permission to travel and adhere to the rules and established practices expected of members of the Executive of the Republic of South Africa. While Mr. Steenhuisen asked that he be allowed to brief the Democratic Alliance Federal Executive prior to the removal letter being delivered to Mr. Whitfield, this would have had no bearing on my decision. It is the responsibility and the prerogative of the President to determine the timing and manner of the appointment and removal of members of the Executive. I am amazed at Mr. Steenhuisen's intemperate reaction to the removal of Mr. Whitfield. He knows very well that the blatant disregard of the rules and practices that govern the international travel of members of the Executive is a serious violation that should not be permitted. It is unprecedented in the history of our democracy that the exercise by the President of his constitutional prerogative and responsibility with respect to a clear violation of rules and established practices governing the conduct of members of the Executive has met with such irresponsible and unjustifiable threats and ultimatums from a member of the Executive. Let it be clear that the President shall not yield to threats and ultimatums, especially coming from members of the Executive, that he has the prerogative to appoint in accordance with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, issued by the Presidency of the Republic of South Africa.